And until 3 nights ago, the scariest thing in my life was forgetting where I put my reading glasses. But betrayal doesn't knock. It slips quietly into your life, wearing the face of someone you trust. My son-in-law, Damien, always acted overly helpful, too polite, too perfect. When he insisted that my car needed urgent maintenance before my weekend trip, I assumed he was being thoughtful. My daughter even said, "Mom, Damien's just trying to keep you safe." But the next day, when I took the car home and accidentally dropped my grocery bag in the driveway, I bent down and saw it. A small black device tucked behind the rear axle, a tracking device, still blinking. My hands trembled, but my mind was clear. I didn't confront him. I didn't tell a soul. Instead, I removed it silently and attached it to a semi-truck heading toward Canada. The next morning, my phone rang. An unfamiliar voice whispered my name. And then he said something that made my heart stop and changed everything I thought I knew about Damien.
My name is Margaret Ellis. I'm 58 years old, and until a few weeks ago, my life was peaceful in a way that now feels almost unreal. I lived alone in my little blue house on Maple Ridge, spending my mornings tending to my garden and evenings chatting with my daughter, Tessa. Her husband, Damien, had always been polite, overly polite, something I dismissed as charm rather than disguise. He opened doors, carried groceries, smiled too perfectly, but the trail never walks in dressed as a villain. It walks in wearing trust. I had no reason to suspect the darkness hiding behind his courteous mask, no reason to believe that within days I would find something under my car that would turn my entire world into a maze of lies, fear, and strategy. My quiet life was ending, and I had no idea. It started with Damien casually mentioning that he had heard a weird noise from my car when he helped Tessa load a few boxes in my trunk last week. I brushed it off, but he pushed gently, telling me he was worried about my safety, especially before my planned weekend trip to visit an old friend. His tone was soft, but there was something in his eyes, an eagerness he quickly masked with a smile. Tessa joined in, saying Damien was only trying to keep me safe, and I didn't want to create unnecessary tension. After all, he had always presented himself as the helpful son-in-law. When he offered to take the car to a mechanic he knew personally, I hesitated only for a second. I handed over the keys that evening, completely unaware I had just stepped into the center of a trap I hadn't seen coming. The next afternoon, Damien returned my car earlier than expected. He said the mechanic checked everything thoroughly and it was all good now. He handed me the keys with that same too-smooth smile, his hand lingering just a moment longer than normal, as if waiting to see if I'd noticed something wrong. His eyes kept flicking toward the driveway, the tires, the undercarriage. It was subtle but unsettling. Tessa, oblivious, hugged me and chatted happily about their dinner plans. I forced a smile, but something about the way Damien kept scanning my car made my stomach tighten. I opened the trunk, the doors, even started the engine, but everything seemed normal. I convinced myself I was overthinking. Still, as they drove away, Damien kept glancing back at my car from the rearview mirror, and that was the moment I first felt a whisper of unease. The next morning, I ran a quick errand for groceries. It was a typical day, sunny, quiet, uneventful. When I got home, I opened my car door, grabbed the grocery bags, and just as I turned to close the door, one of the bags slipped from my hand, spilling apples across the driveway. I bent down to pick them up, annoyed at myself, when something under the car caught my eye. A small black box, tucked tightly behind the rear axle, barely visible unless someone bent down low. I stared at it, my heartbeat suddenly louder than the morning birds. I reached out and touched it. It was warm, blinking faintly with a tiny red light. A tracker, a real one, a device I had only seen in movies, now sitting under my car. My breath froze. And in that moment, everything about Damien's concern snapped into horrifying clarity. Panic hit me first, a tidal wave that made my hands shake. My mind raced with 100 possibilities. Was Damien watching me, tracking me, planning something worse? But then, something inside me hardened. I didn't remove my hand from the device. Instead, I inhaled slowly, forcing myself to think. Confronting Damien would only alert him. Asking Tessa would drag her into danger. Calling the police without evidence could backfire badly. I needed time, information, and silence. Silence would be my shield. I gently pried the tracker free, feeling its weight, small but powerful enough to expose the truth.
I slipped it into my coat pocket and stood up, acting as if nothing had happened. From across the street, Damien's car wasn't there, but I suddenly felt watched anyway. If he wanted to track me, then I would decide where he would follow. Inside my house, I placed the tracker on the kitchen table and watched the small red light pulse steadily. Whoever was monitoring it believed I was still driving around innocently. I needed to use that. My mind began piecing together a plan I never imagined making in my entire life.
I remembered the long-haul trucks that passed by the old fuel station near the outskirts of town. Many of them headed toward the Canadian border. If Damien, or whoever he was working with, wanted to follow my location, they wouldn't be following me at all. They'd be following a truck hundreds of miles away. The thought was terrifying but empowering. I grabbed my jacket, pocketed the tracker, and headed to my car. My heart pounded, but my steps were steady. If Damien wanted to manipulate me, he was about to learn I was not as harmless as he assumed. At the fuel station, trucks idled in long rows, their engines rumbling like sleeping beasts. I parked at a distance, observing the drivers moving around casually. Finally, I saw a semi-truck with a Canada-bound sticker on its windshield. Perfect. My palms sweated as I approached it, pretending to search my pockets for something. When the driver stepped inside the station for coffee, I crouched quickly and attached the tracker to the underside of the trailer, securing it tightly. The device blinked steadily. The signal was still active. My heart beat so loudly I feared someone would hear it. When I walked back to my car, I didn't look back. The truck eventually pulled away, heading north, carrying Damien's trap with it. I sat behind my steering wheel, trembling, not from fear, but from the terrifying thrill of taking control. The game had officially begun. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the tracker, the small red light pulsing like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I picked it up carefully, studying every inch of it. Smooth casing, no manufacturer label, just a tiny SIM card slot and a magnet strong enough to cling to metal at high speed. This wasn't something a normal person just found or borrowed. Someone bought this with a purpose. Someone expected it to stay under my car unnoticed. The realization chilled me. It wasn't just active. It was transmitting right now, telling someone exactly where the device was. If I'd driven to Canada myself, they would have tracked me across borders without a single question. I placed it back down, my breath shaky but controlled. Knowing what it was made it easier to decide what I needed to do next. Later that afternoon, Damien stopped by unexpectedly, using the excuse of checking in. His eyes scanned me quickly, then shifted toward my car like a reflex he couldn't control. He asked casually, "Did you finalize your weekend plans?" His voice was relaxed, but his body wasn't. His shoulders were stiff, and his fingers tapped rhythmically against the doorframe. I kept my tone even, pretending nothing was off, telling him I'd probably leave early Saturday morning. He nodded, but I caught the flicker of calculation behind his smile. He wasn't worried about my safety. He wanted to track where I went, monitor how far I traveled, maybe even know who I met. His questions weren't concern, they were surveillance. As he left, I realized he was waiting for something, a movement on the tracker that he believed was still under my car. Damien lingered longer than necessary, pretending to chat about the weather and his work schedule, but his eyes kept drifting toward my driveway, as if expecting something to happen. His smile felt glued on, tight at the edges, stretched too wide. Every time I mentioned my weekend trip, his posture straightened a little, like the information mattered deeply to him. When I joked lightly about maybe changing plans last minute, his expression tightened almost imperceptibly, a microsecond of panic before he masked it. That tiny reaction told me everything. He wasn't tracking me out of curiosity. He needed to know exactly where I was going. And he needed me to follow the schedule he believed he controlled. Inside, fear twisted into something sharper. Resolve. If he wanted predictability, I was going to give him chaos he'd never see coming. When evening arrived, I drove toward the old fuel station at the outskirts of town, the tracker tucked safely in my coat pocket. My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, but my mind was terrifyingly clear. Rows of trucks lined the lot, massive beasts roaring softly as they idled. I parked far enough away not to attract attention and scanned the area. Then I spotted it. A long-haul semi with a Canadian shipping company logo. Its driver stretched his legs, yawned, and walked inside with a thermos. My heart thumped as I approached the trailer. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but I pushed forward. If Damien wanted to follow me, he would soon be following something much bigger, far away, and completely out of his control. And that thought alone gave me strength. I crouched quickly beside the semi-truck, pretending to tie my shoes in case anyone glanced my way. The metal underbelly of the trailer was cold, dusty, and massive, perfect for hiding something small and discreet. With a deep breath, I pulled the tracker from my pocket. Its red light blinked steadily, unaware of the role it was about to play. My fingers shook as I pressed the magnetized device to the steel frame. Click. Secure. The moment I stepped back, adrenaline rushed through me so sharply I almost stumbled. I had just turned Damien's plan upside down without him even suspecting. The tracker was now attached to 40,000 pounds of cargo heading north, dragging his surveillance into another country. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my heartbeat. No turning back now. I returned to my car and sat with both hands gripping the steering wheel, watching the semi-truck through the windshield. A few minutes later, the driver climbed back in, started the engine, and slowly pulled out of the lot. My pulse raced as the truck rolled away, its massive frame disappearing onto the highway. That small, blinking device under its chassis was now traveling hundreds of miles away, dragging Damien's expectations with it. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of control ignite inside me. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was the first move in a game he didn't know I was playing. As the truck vanished from sight, I whispered to myself, "Follow that, Damien. Let's see where your lies take you now." As I drove home, my phone buzzed, a message from Damien. "Feeling safe now, Mom?" The words were casual, but the message hit like a knife. He was checking if his track was working. He expected me to feel grateful, unaware his tracker was miles away on a highway to another country. I typed back, "Yes, thank you. Everything feels perfect." My fingers hovered before sending it, but I pressed send anyway. Let him think I was oblivious. Let him believe he was winning. His confidence would be his downfall. When I reached home, I placed my phone on the table and watched it, half expecting another message, but none came. He was waiting for the tracker to tell him something it would never reveal. His silence meant one thing: my plan was already working. The next morning began strangely. As I poured my coffee, my phone vibrated again and again. 5 missed calls within minutes, all from an unknown number. The ringtone echoed unnervingly through the quiet kitchen, each attempt more persistent than the last. I tried ignoring it, thinking it was a telemarketer or a wrong number, but something about the timing felt too deliberate. The truck carrying the tracker had already crossed several miles by now, maybe nearing the border. Whoever owned that device must have realized something wasn't right. Yet the repeated calls weren't from Damien. They carried a different energy, urgent and unfiltered. When the phone rang the 6th time, I stood frozen, my thumb hovering over the screen. Whoever this was, they weren't giving up until I answered. When I finally picked up, a man's voice burst through the speaker, shaky, breathless, and strangely frantic. "Mary Mink? Why are you crossing into Canada? Why are you headed north?" My heart slammed against my ribs. He spoke my name like we'd known each other for years, yet I didn't recognize him at all. His tone wasn't threatening. It was confused, almost scared. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words tangled. How did he know my location? How did he know my direction? The only thing traveling north was the tracker. My silence made him more urgent. "Mink, listen to me. Turn around. Come back. It's not safe beyond the border." His fear wasn't for himself. It was directed at me, and that made the call even more chilling. It hit me like a sudden drop in temperature. The man wasn't guessing. He was following the tracker's real-time signal. My mind raced. If he believed I was with the tracker, then he was completely unaware of what I had done. That meant he wasn't working with Damien, or at least not directly. "Who are you?" I finally managed. The line crackled. Then he answered with a hesitant sigh. Someone who's been watching over you longer than you realize. My stomach twisted. That didn't feel protective. It felt invasive. If he had access to the tracker's feed, he'd probably seen where my car had been at all times, maybe even when I wasn't aware. I hung on to the edge of the counter trying to process the terrifying truth. Damien wasn't the only one tracking me. Before I could respond, the man listed details, private, personal things only Damien should have known. My trip schedule, my usual grocery route, the time my lights turned on every evening, the spare key I kept hidden under the potted fern. My breath stuttered. Damien must have shared this information with someone. Or worse, someone had been listening in on our conversations. "You're heading toward the wrong border station," the man continued, voice thick with worry. "If you cross there, they'll intercept you." Intercept me? For what? I gripped the phone tighter, feeling the weight of every word. This wasn't a casual observer. This man was tied into something bigger, something darker, something Damien had only brushed the surface of. And the tracker was just the beginning. My instincts kicked in. Without pausing the conversation, I slid my thumb across the screen and quietly started recording. If this man knew so much, I needed proof. Something solid, something undeniable. His voice trembled as he spoke, shifting between warnings and cryptic statements. "They think you're running. They think you found out." Every sentence dug deeper into my fear. I kept my own voice steady, asking simple questions, testing how much he was willing to reveal. But he kept circling back to the tracker, insisting I stop moving north, unaware that I was standing in my kitchen, not speeding down a highway. My hands shook, but I kept the phone steady. This call wasn't just information, it was evidence. Mid-call, Tessa walked into the house without knocking, carrying a bag of groceries. She paused when she saw my expression, frozen, pale, half hidden behind the phone. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked softly, setting everything down. I shook my head urgently, pointing at the phone. The man kept talking, but her presence made my panic spike. I muted the call for a second and whispered, "Someone is tracking me, not just Damien, someone else." Her eyes widened instantly, her face draining of color. She grabbed my arm gently, grounding me. "Sit," she said, almost commanding. I ended the call abruptly and played the recorded snippet for her. Her breath hitched as she listened. She knew something she hadn't said before. When the recording ended, Tessa sank into the chair across from me, rubbing her temples like she'd been carrying a silent weight for months. "Mom, I should have told you earlier. Damien's been doing things that didn't feel right." My pulse quickened. She explained how he installed security apps on her phone without asking, insisted on driving routes she never chose, and once asked her to keep her location services on for emergencies. She thought it was overprotectiveness, annoying but harmless. But recently, he'd been more controlling, more observant. He'd asked oddly specific questions about my habits, too. I didn't want to believe something was wrong, she admitted, voice trembling. But after hearing that call, "Mom, Damien isn't acting alone, and I think he's deeper than either of us realized." As Tessa finished speaking, a chilling realization formed between us. Damien wasn't tracking me out of curiosity or paranoia. He was following me for someone else. The stranger's panic call, the detailed knowledge of my routines, the urgency in his voice, it all pointed to a larger network. One Damien was only a small part of. I replayed the last 24 hours in my mind. Damien insisting on maintenance, the tracker under my car, the mysterious caller believing I was headed to Canada. None of these events aligned unless someone behind the scenes had been monitoring me for weeks, maybe months. Tessa reached for my hand, her voice trembling. "Mom, what if the tracker wasn't about watching you? What if it was about getting you somewhere?" That possibility sent a cold shiver down my spine. Tessa excused herself briefly and returned with a small leather-bound journal, something I'd never seen before. "Damien left this in the garage," she whispered. The moment I held it, I sensed trouble. Inside were messy notes, half-erased sketches, and timestamps that matched days Damien had borrowed my car. But one page stood out, a list of dates and mileage readings followed by names I didn't recognize. At the bottom, circled repeatedly, was my name. The notes beside it said primary route verified and signal reliable. My throat tightened. This wasn't a paranoid man's scribble. This was organized. Someone was mapping my movements with precision, and the person who owned this journal didn't plan on me finding it. Tessa watched my face carefully. "Mom, I think Damien was reporting to someone." Just as we processed the implications of the journal, my phone rang again, this time from a known number. It was the truck driver whose rig carried the tracker. His voice was uneasy. "Ma'am, I don't know what's going on, but 2 black SUVs have been tailing me since last night. They keep circling the rest stops I go to." My pulse spiked. The tracker had led someone directly to him. "Did you notice anything else?" I asked. He exhaled shakily. "Yeah, one of them showed me a picture of you and asked if I'd seen this woman cross the border." That snapped something inside me. Whoever was behind this wasn't confused. They were hunting. And the only reason they hadn't found me yet was because the tracker was no longer on my car. Panicked but thinking clearly, I called the local police, hoping for guidance. A dispatcher listened carefully until I mentioned the tracker, the journal, and the SUVs near the border. Her tone shifted instantly. "Ma'am, stay inside. Don't go anywhere," she said, sounding more alarmed than reassuring. Before I could ask why, she added, "Someone from a federal task group may contact you. Do not speak to anyone else claiming to be law enforcement." The line went dead. I stared at Tessa in disbelief. What kind of situation required a federal warning? What exactly had Damien gotten involved with, and why was my name on someone's list? The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. Tessa whispered, "Mom, whatever this is, it's bigger than us." As tension thickened, Tessa suddenly froze, as if remembering something buried deep. "Wait, Damien once mentioned a route job," she said slowly. "He said it paid extra. He told me not to worry." I urged her to continue. She frowned, piecing it together. He'd leave at weird hours, midnight, sometimes 4 a.m. He always said it was temporary. My stomach tightened. Midnight routes, secret payments, someone monitoring my movements. This wasn't personal, it was logistical. "Mom," she continued, "he once asked me if you ever took detours. He was weirdly specific about gas stations and rest stops." That settled it. Damien wasn't spying on me emotionally or manipulatively. He was gathering data. But for who? And why did they want my routes, not his? I opened the journal again, scanning every scribbled word until a photograph slipped out. Grainy, but unmistakable. It was a picture of my car parked outside an old storage facility I hadn't visited in years. Beside the photo was a note, "Pickup confirmation pending." A chill shot through me. That facility wasn't random. It belongs to my late husband, a place we used to store old documents and items from his business. My husband had passed away 6 years ago, but he used that facility for sensitive files, including clients he never talked about. Suddenly, everything made horrifying sense. Someone believed I had something stored there, something they wanted. The tracker wasn't on me by accident. They were trying to lead me back to that facility. The realization settled heavily between Tessa and me. If the storage facility was the target, then we needed to see what they were after. I didn't want to go near it, but answers wouldn't come from sitting in fear. "Mom, we should go," Tessa said softly but firmly. I hesitated, imagining the consequences, imagining the SUVs that might appear. But if someone believed I had something of value, then knowing what that something was could be the difference between running blindly and fighting intelligently. I nodded slowly. "We'll go, but not alone." I grabbed my phone, recorded a final message documenting everything, and locked the journal inside my purse. The next steps would be dangerous, but I wouldn't walk into the past unprepared.
Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you subscribe, because what we discovered at that storage facility changed everything in a way I never saw coming.
Just as the semi-truck approached the Canadian checkpoint, border agents flagged it aside. The driver later told me they weren't calm or casual. They approached like they were expecting a major threat. The tracker's signal had triggered alerts on both sides of the border. Agents used specialized scanners and immediately detected an unfamiliar device attached to the truck's underside. The moment they extracted it, things escalated. They questioned the driver for nearly an hour, showing him screenshots of the tracker's real-time route. He explained how he'd found 2 black SUVs tailing him, and suddenly the officer's expressions changed from suspicion to concern. They weren't just investigating a tracker. They believed someone dangerous was following it, and that someone was about to be identified. Border authorities ran the serial number of the tracker through multiple databases. What they found sent up immediate red flags. The device had been purchased using a prepaid card under a fake name, but the store surveillance system told a different story. When they traced the timestamp, the footage showed Damien at the counter, paying cash, glancing over his shoulder nervously. The agents cross-checked this with phone records and discovered the prepaid card was activated in a location 10 minutes from my house. Then another detail surfaced. Damien had used a stolen identity to create online accounts connected to the tracker. This wasn't a one-time attempt to spy on me. It was part of a pattern, a trail of digital fingerprints all pointing to a man who believed he'd covered every track. He was wrong. U.S. investigators coordinated with border officials, piecing together Damien's movements over the last several weeks. With the journal, the call recording, and the footage, they had enough probable cause to confront him. 2 agents arrived at our house while Tessa and I were still preparing to visit the storage facility. Their sharp knock cut through the air. Damien opened the door with his usual fake confidence until they presented the evidence. His smirk vanished. The agents questioned him about the tracker, the stolen identity, and the unusual route jobs he'd been taking.
He attempted to play innocent, insisting he was being set up, but the agents weren't fooled. When they revealed they had footage placing him at the purchase location, his voice cracked. For the first time, Damien realized the trap he set had snapped shut on him instead. Cornered and panicking, Damien made a reckless move. While the agent stepped outside to radio confirmation, he bolted through the back door, sprinting across the yard like a man running from his own shadow. Tessa gasped as we watched from the kitchen window. The agents reacted instantly, chasing him through the neighborhood. Damien tried jumping a fence, slipped, then scrambled back up, limping but still moving. His desperation made him sloppy. He cut through a neighbor's yard, tripped over a garden hose, and nearly collided with a parked car. What he didn't know was that additional units were already circling the block. When he turned the corner, thinking he'd found a path to freedom, 2 patrol cars blocked him in. He froze, caught between steel and consequence. The moment officers surrounded him, Damien's bravado evaporated. He dropped to his knees, hands trembling as they cuffed him. The charges were read aloud: identity theft, fraud, illegal surveillance, stalking, and attempted insurance exploitation. Each accusation darkened his face further. He kept muttering that it was a misunderstanding, that he never meant harm, but the evidence was undeniable and overwhelming. The journal alone mapped out weeks of calculated planning, the tracker footage, the border alert, the prepaid card. All of it painted a clear picture of a man who thought he was smarter than everyone else. As they guided him into the patrol car, he looked back at the house, but not for me, for Tessa. He knew he'd lost everything, including the power he once held over her. That evening, Tessa didn't hesitate. She sat at the dining table with a calmness I hadn't seen in years and drafted the divorce papers. No shaking hands, no second thoughts. Just quiet strength. "I should have done this a long time ago," she whispered, sliding the completed forms toward me. For so long, she had excused Damien's controlling behavior, convincing herself it was love or worry. Now she saw clearly it was surveillance, manipulation, and fear disguised as concern. She scheduled a meeting with an attorney for the next morning. As she hit send on the email, her shoulders lowered as if shedding a heavy weight she carried for far too long. She was no longer Damien's target, no longer his excuse, no longer his possession. A few days later, I took a drive alone. No tracker, no fear, no one watching. The road felt wider, the world quieter, the sky brighter than it had in months. I drove past open fields, winding roads, and distant hills, savoring every mile of undisturbed freedom. For the first time since this began, my thoughts didn't race with worry. Instead, I felt a deep, grounding certainty. I had beaten him at his own game. I had turned his plan upside down and protected my family by refusing to stay silent.
As I pulled onto a scenic overlook and stepped out of the car, the wind felt like a final reminder. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was finally, undeniably, free.